Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching ECLECTICKA. I am Michael 7 Michael, and we've got Charles, aka Sensei Vegan, and we have a special guest, Rachel Presser. That's right, from Sonic Toad. How you doing, miss?
Oh, hi. I'm good. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. Think of me like the Wizard of Oz.
She's like the Oracle. You're like the Oracle, man.
Like the Oracle.
Behind the Toad. Okay, so Rachel, you, if I get this correct, you design and develop video games, correct?
Well, I'm a narrative designer and like former game producer. I work mostly with the business of games, but like writing games is my major passion.
And how does one start writing games? Like, what inspired you to say, hey, I'm going to start creating games?
So it started early. When I was a kid, I played a lot of like the classic adventure games growing up, like King's Quest, Space Quest, Monkey Island, and the like. And then I also played a lot of what was known as shareware at the time. Now you call them indie developers. And so, so playing like all those games that like put a big emphasis on storytelling and exploration, like this was like opposed to say the more like reflex heavy games you find for like the NES and other popular consoles at the time. And so like I really just loved the whole idea of like talking to characters, finding out their motivations, and like how to make the story advance. It gave you like more agency than say a more passive medium like watching a TV show or a movie. And so that like really was what inspired me to get into creative writing, and especially for games. And that dream stuck with me even at moments of my life where I thought it was dead.
Now, would you say it's an even amount of guys and gals into gaming? Or would you say it's predominantly a male field, or?
Like historically or now?
Now.
Now I'd say, I don't know, because historically even, I always knew there were other women who were into this field. Hell, it was women who also pioneered a lot of gaming, like Roberta Williams and Jane Jensen and whatnot. Nowadays, I think that because it's talked about a bit more, there's definitely more of an even split of men and women into gaming. And in fact, I think that the Entertainment Software Association actually said that there's, for certain genres, there's ones that skew more heavily towards women than men actually, in terms of also who's making the purchasing decisions for households. Some interesting stuff.
That is.
If you're a geek, if you geek out about statistics and stuff, is something you might want to look up.
Now, when you create the stories, well, first of all, do you start with the stories or you start with the characters?
That's a good question. Because sometimes you might get inspired for a character first. Yeah. I tend to keep something of a little repository, for lack of a better word, of the kind of things that inspire me and observations I make that I'm oh hey, this would make for an interesting premise or character for a short story or for a video game. Most of the time though, I think that the premise for the story does come first, because then it's a little easier to I think fit a character into that particular setting than it is to say make a story for a specific character. There's not really a right or wrong answer there, because I'm sure there's plenty of narrative designers who would disagree with that.
Well, it's interesting because Charles, we talk about this all the time. There's the sea of remakes, different characters, and obviously DC puts a lot of pressure on Batman to carry it.
That's their bread and butter.
Right. Do you see the same thing with gaming? So certain companies would just put so much energy into Mario instead of creating new games? Do you see that same pattern there?
Yeah, I do see that more with the bigger companies. When you have say this like, super like well-known IP of intellectual property, like Mario, which is like that, like that's never going to die out. It's always going to have millions of people, who know it and who will play it. It definitely is a lot riskier, to like create this whole new story and game world and surrounding lore for it, and like see if it attracts a fan base. I mean, obviously, a company like Nintendo they have more wherewithal to take that kind of risk. I mean, they have much more resources to do that, but it's really the indie developers who are taking the risk there, at least from what I can see. Because hey, the big AAA studios, they've got shareholders, they got to keep happy, and they don't. And so I think it's like the same exact thing you also just see with with like the comics, with like the never-ending barrage of like superhero movies. It's just that like, hey, this is like it is a hit-driven business, whether we like it or not, and sometimes not all IPs are really going to take off, and so. But I don't know. I do think it is kind of like, I guess, shameful that some of these companies they aren't taking more risk, and it's like you have the wherewithal to do it. Like, come on, give people something new, and that's where I think a lot of indie developers are really picking up the slack there.
Yeah, I mean, don't you feel that the independents are more risk? They're bigger risk takers.
Yep, we are.
Yeah, and I always said that if you want the creativity to go higher, you definitely need to reach down into the independent market. And I wish that some of these bigger gaming companies would actually, if they see a company that they like, why don't they take and, maybe work with that company? You understand? And help them and work with them in their ideas.
Sometimes they do. Like, you might be able to get a really good work for hire arrangement if they really like your work, if you built up a significant fan base on your own. And there's like some pluses and minuses that come with such arrangements, because like I know some developers like who've gone the work for hire route, or like they've been published by like a much bigger company, and that like, well, it does bring a lot of prestige. It can bring you a lot of opportunities, because especially if you're trying to get like other work for hire, you're trying to like build up your fan base on your own, like, oh yeah, the reach you'll gain like with like a publishing contract from, say, a company like Activision, that's enormous. That's like that definitely is something that can be like a major stepping stone to to like building up more of your fan base and really getting out there. But on the same token, it also like makes you work on their terms, so that like if suddenly like a producer decides like down the line that you need to change this in the game because some other executive doesn't like it, or
see, that's one thing I disagree with right there.
Like
that's sad.
So it can be a double-edged sword. It can bring a lot of amazing benefits, but can also be like bring a lot of tribulation if like you don't really like people telling you what to do with your vision, or it's just like, oh hey, we have to change this in the game or else we're not going to get paid, and getting paid is kind of important. So yeah, it can be a double-edged sword, to be honest.
Now you have some announcements that you're going to have at GamerCon, correct?
Announcement. I mean, not really announcements per se. I mean, just I guess talking a little bit about some of the stuff I'm currently working on. I mean, I actually just like released a new project about. Actually, it ties in with what I was just mentioning with like working for Activision or other publishers. I just put out a webinar recently on Udemy called Content Strategy for Indie Developers, because I think that if you want to go the work for hire route, do the stuff that's all about using games as marketing, because they're much shorter projects. You can get paid pretty well for them, and then it also can be a great learning experience, which can make you a better game developer. And you're not going to like be like in like the same kind of commitment that you would be in a publishing contract. And then conversely, you can also use like a lot of the power of content marketing and SEO to really like boost up your presence, and like try to like basically rise above the tide of the indie apocalypse that we're currently facing right now. Because you do have to No, you have to do a lot more now to get noticed, and so that's what my course is like really talking about there. That's exactly what I plan on doing for my upcoming game, Clam Chowder Hub Run, which yeah, I'm hoping to get an expo ready version of the game put out by the end of the year. So I'm sorry I don't currently have a site to promote for it right now. I wanted to wait until the next iteration of the prototype is ready.
I have a question. Being a gamer, like I said, I always tell people there's a difference between being a hardcore gamer and being a recreational gamer. You know, if you game, people know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I see a lot of these bigger companies. I'm going to get your insight on this.
Okay.
Right now, it's pay to play. You know what I mean? It's like you go out, you buy a game, you spend $65, then you got to buy a season pass, and then you have to buy, spend all this money on these little microtransactions, and then when it's all said and done, you spent like $600 on a game. You know what I mean? And you still haven't even cracked the surface of all the content in the game. I mean, how do you feel about this whole, pay to play microtransaction thing? Me personally, I think it's messing up gaming. I mean,
I don't like it either. I don't like it either. It also messes things up from a design perspective, because case in point, that's actually how I started designing Clam Chowder Hub Run, because I belong to a game development collective called Playcrafting. That's actually where Michael and I met. We basically have all these different demo nights, showcases. I teach the business courses over at Playcrafting, and I saw what a lot of my peers were making for touchscreen devices. As I was joking around before we went live, for someone who works in gaming and tech, I can be a bit of a Luddite. I joke about it, but my God, this is true. I grew up, gaming on Macs and then eventually PCs, and that's actually still what I largely game with. And so I hadn't really caught on with the whole mobile thing just yet. So when I was still with Himalaya, a lot of people were saying hey, we think these devices are great for playing adventure games. The touchscreen's very intuitive. You should definitely put this out. So we did make a mobile port of our flagship title, Alamo and the Lost Dutchman's Mine, and so we do want to put out Mages is going to be out for mobile, I think, long after we get the PC release sorted. But I was gonna figure, hey, I should make Clam Chowder Hub Run specially for mobile devices, from the get-go. But then when I was making plans for it, it's holy crap, you have to do so much with making that monetization a key part of the game design. It can totally screw up your vision. And while there were some things that that's sounded I think even a little interesting from the design point of view, when doing some focus research, people were basically saying don't make people play for things to make the game easier, but it's okay if you want to make them pay for extra costumes for the main character or other customization kind of stuff. And that doesn't sound as much of a blatant cash grab, because that is kind of how I see a lot of F2P monetization schemes. It's a blatant cash grab. And you see, whereas I come from the more old school mindset of, here, you pay for this game, you're done.
That's it. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
And I say it was I call it Candy Crush syndrome. Yeah, you know what I mean? Or Angry Birds. It's free to play. No, it's not free to play. It's not free to play, because it's if you take and you really break it down, and I tell people, if you look at it, at the end of the year, how much money you spent on getting extra lives or getting these power-ups, you paid way more than what you would have dropped just buying the game outright. People don't realize when they start nickel and diming you. And I'm a huge Call of Duty fan. And honestly, I believe Activision, they've made billions of dollars off those microtransactions, and they're collapsing their game, because it's this is crazy. They have the whole black market system. You You go in, you earn points during the game, and you can buy like weapons. You have to basically purchase everything. But what I noticed, it's basically like a gambling system. That's all it is. It's like a Las Vegas slot machine. You put the points in, you hit the button, and the wheels spin, and you get something. But it's gotten to the point where it's like you get the generic stuff. In order to get the good stuff, you have to pay money. And it's like $2 a spin. People don't realize that you're paying $2 a spin in order to get stuff. And this is no lie. You can look this up on YouTube. They were dropping like $500-$600 on these black market points to get these weapons and different camo colors and stuff. And they still weren't getting everything. That's ludicrous. That's ludicrous.
I just don't think it's very sustainable in the long run. No, because eventually people just wake up to like what a blatant cash grab is, which like does like nothing for like, enjoyable gameplay. For that, there's nothing for the player. It's not adding anything like super innovative like to the game's design or anything. And whereas like I mentioned, my roots are in old school adventure games and like games based more on like the narrative and exploration.
Right.
I'm so glad I decided to take Clam Chowder Hub Run to PC just so I can charge a single fee for it and be done.
And supply drops. That's another thing they call it. It's like if you're playing like Black Ops, it's the black market, and then with the regular Call of Duty, they call it supply drops. I call it I can't even say it on the air what I call it, but it's just ripping people off. And I mean, you have kids playing, and I would love to see the faces of some of these parents when their kid asks for the credit card. And then they get a bill for a couple $100 because you bought some supply drop points. That stuff adds up.
Yeah,
that stuff adds up.
I remember a couple of years ago, there was like someone who sued Apple or like the developer of like I think it was like the Smurfs game or something. I don't have it directly in front of me, but I remember seeing it kept I remember reading about it on Gama Sutra like a while back, and then it hit mainstream news because it was a lawsuit that basically set a precedent for like the lockout windows in monetized games because basically like I think what happened was that someone basically tried to use their iPad as a babysitter, and I'm so sorry, I have like very strong feelings about that. And that was my take from the article I had read, that they basically tried to use the iPad as a babysitter and then were furious that their kid racked up like $600 in microtransactions, and because she was scared that her Smurfs were going to die. And I get how something like that could be like traumatizing to a child, but this is exactly like what's wrong with the whole model. And like if you just like go back to the old model of like you pay this fee once, or maybe if there's DLC that does significantly add to the game, like there's like, so I'm about to show my age and my devotion to old school niche games, but there was a game series called Realms. It was an RPG made by Fanasoft in like the mid to late 90s, and so that was basically like Realms itself was free. It came with a bunch of free scenarios, but if you wanted more scenarios, you had to pay for them.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know. I think that's totally fine. Like that's totally fine if like because like these scenarios would take like days to complete. I think it was like 10 to $15 a scenario. But like, excuse me, but the first like actual like copy of the game came with a couple free scenarios that you could see if you liked it. You could play each paid scenario up to a certain point, then you couldn't access it further unless you had a valid serial code. And so if you have something like that, I think that's totally fine. If you've got like a similar premise, but these microtransactions are just not sustainable. And then you still have kids racking up these huge bills, even though that lawsuit set some kind of precedent about lockout windows. And yeah, it's just wild. And
Well,
I
we're gonna transition a little bit to the death or the birth of creativity. We're talking
Okay.
about this constantly within music. We're talking about this with TV shows. And now let's talk a little bit about this with trailers and bring it back to gaming. So, for instance, one of the most interesting, following the whole reality movie thing ever since Blair Witch, they have one called The Monster Project.
That's what it looked like a Blair Witch.
Right. So this
Yeah, like
is
a Blair Witch.
interesting. So they put out an ad like on a Craigslist or something, and they try, hey, all you people that think you're monsters, because in their mind you guys are crazy. We're gonna do this film. Come on, and they actually put real monsters into their
Run
film,
into some. Yeah.
and they didn't realize that we're doing that. So I thought that's on the plus side.
That's cool. I like that.
That was
Yeah.
pretty
I like
cool.
that.
Now, on the other side, we've got another Jigsaw movie, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Another Saw. So that's that. And then we have Chucky,
Well,
another Chucky movie.
I think they have to get to the point where they have to say, you know what, let it go, man. There's so many other great ideas out there. Guy with cam, you know what I mean?
Thank you. Plug, plug, plug.
Yeah, man. Seriously, and it's like they don't want to.
That was
What are they
awesome.
afraid of?
Right.
You
Well,
understand? What
I'll
are they
tell
afraid
you.
of?
I'll tell you what they're afraid of. They're afraid of pissing off the shareholders. They hoard all this money, don't want to take any risk. It's runaway capitalism on the silver screen or on your video game console. That is really what it boils down to, because you have all this pressure just to keep producing a profit, and so you want to go with the intellectual properties that already have some kind of pre-built fan base, except that
Right.
no, we're tired of seeing the same old things. If they're such great businessmen, geez, they forget all about the concept of risk and reward, that you have to take some kind of risk.
Right.
Look, I teach this stuff for a living, okay? And I got to point out all the time, just like when people, like to get into arguments with me about minimum wage, and I point out, hey, you really suck at the concept of scale. So, yeah, it's the same idea. These people suck at the concept of risk and reward, and that they have the wherewithal to take the risk, but they're just refusing to. So, once again, it boils down, to like the indie developers, indie filmmakers, indie comic artists who are out there actually, doing something different, especially these days. What I think is like really important, as we have like more discussions about these films that just like aren't getting it right in terms of representation. Like, why do you think all the indies are stepping up? Because like we want diversity in our media, and we don't want it to be optic. We want it, we want people's stories to be told. We want like people to actually empathize with the struggles of marginalized groups, and to actually, for God's sake, stop casting like white people to play Asian roles. What the hell is wrong with these casting directors? My God.
Ghost in the Shell.
Ghost in the Shell. Sorry. Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, that.
Exactly.
Well, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange.
Yeah, Doctor Strange. Yeah, it's like, come on. Because you get used to certain things. You know what I mean? Change isn't bad, but you get used to this stuff. And I always tell people, gamers, comic book fans, they're very anal about their characters, man.
Yeah.
So if you start changing stuff way too much, you're going to get a lot of backlash, so.
That's the thing, is you can only change something so much. Like, all right, so, okay, let me like make like a pretty like controversial like statement here. Like, look at all the people who completely lost it over the Ghostbusters, the new Ghostbusters movie.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
When it's like, look at what men did to My Little Pony. Like, come on, the cartoon.
Yeah, I remember that cartoon.
Do you want to see half the fan fiction out there? God, there are like corners of the internet I was so much happier not knowing about. But yet they want to go and like have a fit about a female Doctor Who, that like come on, like women went all these years without having like someone like that to look up to, playing like a major role like that. And so with that said, it's like, okay, I can kind of understand that. All right, it's not that people are opposed to like an action movie with like 4 women as the main characters. They're really opposed to like this beloved IP that like has been like totally remade like this. It's like I can understand that point of view.
Also, it wasn't good too. I mean, that was no one wants to.
I didn't see it, so I can't give an opinion.
Yeah, it wasn't as good as the original. But I mean, look at Wonder Woman. It took Wonder Woman to save DC's movie franchise, because they weren't doing it. You know what I mean? So,
well, what do you guys think about the people that kind of go half and half? So they're not being totally original. What they're doing is, but they're not doing a straight up remake. They're kind of like taking something and flipping it. So. There's a new thing with Marlon Wayans called Naked on Netflix, which is basically Groundhog's Day. But they did something interesting. They basically took the Damien movies, and they have a thing called Little Evil.
Yeah, that's basically
It's basically Damien.
The Omen, right? Damien was the Omen.
The Omen, right? The Omen, right?
That's exactly what they. I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, that's what that is. But they made it kind of like funny too. You know what I mean?
They made it a comedy. That seems to be the default now. When they did Chips or Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to totally do it. We're going to make it into a comedy.
I still think that's better than just this like complete lack of imagination or innovation whatsoever, by just like putting out the same exact IPs over and over, or like the same, or like remakes that really of films that really didn't need to be remade.
Mm-hmm. Well, look what's coming out. They're doing Death Wish.
Mm-hmm.
Death Wish is coming out again. I'm like, do you really have to remake Death Wish? I don't see how you can top Charles Bronson. I really don't. I mean, I like Bruce Willis, but do I really want to see Death Wish? I think there's other projects out there that I'd rather see than Death Wish. And I'm a Bruce Willis fan. No shade on Bruce Willis, but come on, Hollywood.
Totally agree.
So, this is all the time we have for today. So thankful that you were able to bring your knowledge, Miss Rachel.
Yeah.
Thanks for
having
and this
me
is
on.
a long time trying to get you on the show. So I'm glad that we finally got you to be a part of this.
Apologize for the technical difficulties.
No worries. So, guys,
right.
please go to sonictoad.com, and I'm sure there'll be updates to the site, other links, other things that you guys could check out. Thank you so much for coming to be a part of Eclectica today. And Charles, always
a pleasure, man.
Representing. And check us out on cable as well. All the information's on the site, scvnetwork.com, and you're watching Eclectica, and we'll see you next week. All righty. Have a good one. And be safe. Be good to one another. Yeah. Got to say that.
My finger right in your eye.
Who's committing it? The Bori to the Hypno Toad.